Arup, and I'm joined by my colleague here, Anna Lavelle, a senior catchment scientist, and together we'll be your co-hosts and much needed timekeepers throughout the next 90 minutes. So that's because if we go over the next, oh crap, I don't have the clicker. Oh, I left it over here, brilliant. Good start. There we go. And that's because we have pulled together an amazing team of experts in their field. Some are in the room with us today, they're dotted around on the tables around you, and there's also others joining us online, and we're all here, or they're all here to share their experience and knowledge with us today, centered around river health. In the interest of time, we will probably introduce these speakers as we go along, but we really appreciate them joining our session today, and looking forward to get stuck into what they have to say. So, shortly, just going through the agenda then, we will start with an introduction to what we actually mean by river health journeys from Anna, and who will be followed then by Dr. Robert Bradburn. We will then run through 5, well, I think personally, incredible river health journeys from all around the world, where we hope you'll be able to pull out some of those common themes from them and think about what have you seen across all those 5 journeys, and what does a successful river journey look like, what were the common themes, and then basically what you then do is focus on the main part of the session and make sure that we have sufficient time to get stuck into the workshop, where we'll ask you to reflect on your own personal river health journey, sharing insights on those around you on your table, and explore how global lessons can help shape future climate action for healthier rivers. We'll share more on that workshop a little bit later. You'll notice that we haven't shared around the little prints out yet. We'll do that in a moment. But now I'll pass on to my colleague Anna.
Welcome all. So why are rivers important, and what is river health? Rivers are nature's arteries, dynamic systems that have shaped landscapes, sustained life, and connected communities for millennia. River health can be referred to as a river's ability to maintain its natural ecological function and support a thriving ecosystem. It's shaped by the dynamic interplay between physical, chemical, biological, and societal factors. But climate change is placing increasing strain on river systems, which have direct consequences to communities that depend on them. This brings me on to the 4 corners of river health. Water quality. So as climate change intensifies, existing water challenges such as temperatures, increased pollution are becoming more pronounced. Temperature change can disrupt biological processes, including the ability of fish to migrate, and can lead to shifts in species composition with direct implications for ecosystem health and human water use. Water quantity. More frequent and severe droughts and floods can disrupt natural flow regimes. This affects aquatic life, but also impacts water availability for households, farming, industry, and increases the risk of flood damage to infrastructure and homes. Geomorphology. Human interventions such as channelization, barriers to migration, and river modifications fragment habitats and interfere with natural processes. These changes reduce the river's ability to buffer extreme events and support biodiversity, which in turn affects ecosystem services that society relies on. And then finally, biodiversity. As river systems lose resilience, the species that depend on them face increasing threats. The loss of biodiversity undermines the stability of ecosystems that they provide, from clean water and climate regulation to recreational and cultural value. So all significant here. But there is hope. Across science, policy, and practice, we're seeing new ideas and real momentum. Restoration efforts, nature-based solutions, and collaborative catchment planning, all which will be touched upon today, are helping us rethink how we care for rivers. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome Dr. Robert Bradburn to open our session today. Dr. Bradburn is the Chief Scientist at the Environment Agency, where he leads the organisation's scientific strategy and provides expert advice on environmental challenges across England. With over two decades of experience in government science, he's played a key role in shaping national responses to climate and ecological issues. He's a fellow of the Royal Society of Biology and a passionate advocate for using science to create a better, more resilient environment. Today, he'll be sharing his reflections on river health, past, present, and future. So please welcome Rob.
First challenge, can the chief scientist make the slides work? Yes, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you to the organisers and for inviting me to talk on what I think is a really great subject this afternoon. And I hope to set up what I'm sure will be a very interesting conversation later. I'm going to start by saying some things which you might not expect a scientist to say, because I'm very attracted to the concept of river health for a number of reasons that perhaps aren't the reasons that you would expect coming from a scientist. Because actually, I rather like the fact that it isn't an absolute concept. No two rivers are alike. No two situations that those rivers find themselves in are alike. But I think as a concept, it enables us to have a vision towards this idea of what is healthy, what is well-functioning, without trying to put it into a one-size-fits-all box. And there's no right answer to achieving it. Every situation will be different, and every player will have a different role. So achieving health for ourselves is about achieving the right balance for the individual, and it's about responding to feedback and knowing when you're doing things that aren't good for you. And that's the same for a healthy river. We need to be able to create balance, and to do that, we need to be able to understand how that river is behaving. But the most excellent reason for using, is it that one? Using, this is the trouble, if you wander around when you give presentations, microphones are an absolute pain. For using this concept is because it gives us a positive vision to work to. It gives us a hopeful vision to work to for the river itself, for the organisms in that river, and for society around that river. And that means that we can use that hopeful framework to bring collaborations together to start to achieve some of the things that are difficult to achieve. River health and healthy rivers flowing through complex landscapes are difficult to achieve, but that means we need to work with partners all around those rivers. And having a concept like this, which can bring us together in a mutually supportive way, is really powerful. And the last thing I will say on this is that it avoids us chasing numbers. In England, we have lots and lots of numbers to chase. We have targets all over the place for individual rivers, for rivers as a country, even international targets. And if we chase those numbers, so often we end up going down alleys and pointing the blame at individuals. And that doesn't necessarily move us towards that overall aim of improving the health of our rivers. So I think it's important that we can take a step back and use this as a wider framing. And it's a framing that we can apply at all scales. And I'm really delighted this afternoon we're going to hear about so many different scales of applying this thinking in river journeys. Above me I have one of our smaller rivers, a little chalk stream running through Wiltshire, and one of our slightly larger rivers that is equally important to the Environment Agency and is equally important that we have it in a healthy state, but, as you can imagine, has a whole load of different challenges. And then we think about those four corners that Hannah's mentioned and why those might be helpful for us. And that is because of that combination of the physical, biological, chemical, and social factors that have been mentioned. You can't have a healthy river by focusing on one of those. But you're almost certainly going to need people working with that river who are really good at focusing on one of those to get the whole system working. It also puts me in mind of the concept of natural capital, which is something that we've been looking at in England now for a number of years. Now, I have to be really careful at this point. I have been told for the past 15 years that if I mention ecosystem services, natural capital, people will start to fall asleep or leave the room because it is so techie and boring. So I will try not to make it techie and boring, and I hope you won't fall asleep or leave the room, because I think it is a useful concept for us, which we've been trying to incorporate into the way that we take decisions about how we use our rivers. It's useful because it gives us a common language to work to. It gives us a language which we're used to thinking about in other aspects of our life. If we consider our rivers and the state of those rivers and the health of those rivers as part of our bank account, then we can choose to invest in that to improve the quality of those rivers, or we can choose to draw down on it. And that puts us in mind of where we want to be in terms of the balance that we're trying to get out of it. And also, it helps us when other people come to us and say, but you're doing the wrong thing to that river. I want something else out of that river. That is because they have placed a different value from the value that we've chosen to take account of in our decision on their stretch of the river. That is not wrong, it is different. But in so many of our decision-making contexts, because we see things from different angles, it can make it difficult then to move forward to a new solution if we can't recognise those different values that people put on our rivers. So we're thinking a lot this week about the changing climate. And I've just said that I think the concept of a healthy river is a useful one in managing our rivers. But there always has to be a but in a presentation. And that but is the fact that our situation, the situation that our rivers find themselves in, is now changing. Some of the things that we're going to hear about this afternoon are projects that take many, many years to improve the health of the water systems around them. But in many years, those rivers will not be in the same climate that they are now. They won't be in the same social, political system that they are in now. So as we're thinking ahead to the health of our rivers in future, we need to think ahead to the climate that those rivers will be in, to the social systems that those rivers will be in. And we have to bear in mind that these changes can happen in a fairly predictable way. We've got better and better climate models. We can model how river flows might be in future. But they can also happen in jumps and starts. And we've got to be able to adapt and work to those. So again, thinking of the English situation, we've seen quite a significant shift in the last few years, possibly sped up by the COVID pandemic, of a change in social attitude as to what people want out of their rivers. I can stand here and I can tell you that scientifically, the River Thames, since the 1950s, when it was almost biologically dead, now supports a wide variety of fish species. It is now much more alive than it has been for many, many decades beforehand. I can tell you scientifically that heavy metals, ammonia, phosphate concentrations have all plummeted in the majority of our rivers in England. And I can tell you scientifically that the work that goes in to keep environmentally safe levels of water flowing through our rivers is really paying dividends, despite the fact that we've had the driest spring for about 50 years in England. But if you read our press, if you listen to our politics, you will see that our rivers are in a disgusting, degraded state. Society has decided that what is good, what is healthy, has changed. What they accept has changed. So I could stand up as a scientist and say, no, I shall tell you from a river health perspective that this is what good looks like. but I'd probably be missing the point, because those four corners all act within that social context. And so, you know, in Victorian times in England, our rivers were super important for transport. They were super important for removing waste. They were super important for providing power. Now they're important for another reason. The recreational value of our waters is enormous in England, and it outstrips the value of many of the other ecosystem services that we could talk about. And that means we need to take it into account very carefully in the decisions that we make. So I think we've got a real opportunity this afternoon to look forward into somewhat uncharted territories for many of our waters and to learn from each other from around the world, because I believe that around the world we are seeing these things happening at different paces, and that means we've got an opportunity to learn from each other as to how we respond to these changes and these challenges at different paces. And I hope that in conclusion this afternoon, by learning together, we can find ourselves in a situation where we have rivers with our natural capital that's growing, not shrinking, that the services that they deliver are applying to more people, and that communities at all scales are more fully engaged with the healthy river journey. So thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was really inspiring and really good to get that perspective from England, and as a scientist as well, as you emphasized a lot. So I'll now bring us on to all of our 5 journeys that we want to absolutely rush through and make sure we leave enough time for the workshop. So I've got a little bit of a diagram here to show where all of our journeys are from. You can see we've tried to cover all of these different 4 corners that we've mentioned a couple of times now, and also try and get a different variety of scale in terms of their development and where they are. So I hope that online, as Celeste can hear us, but she is a associate director from ARP, who is our Australasia integrated water management leader, and she's going to kick things from down under. Celeste, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'll be asking you to click Elliot if that's okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, g'day everybody. I'm coming to you from Melbourne in Australia, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our river journey, particularly that in a city context of the River Yarra, which you can see there, which winds its way through Melbourne and out to sea. Melbourne is a city of 5 million people. It's fairly sprawly in nature. But yes, this is very much a waterways city, and we love our waterways as the green hearts of our city. If we go to the next slide. I thought this little framework, which we use to tell the story of integrated water management, might be a useful one to reflect on, particularly in urban context. It really reflects on the role of water within a city and the different drivers we've experienced in most cities around the world. Every city really started with a water supply, its reason for being, and brought in water from sometimes faraway catchments, and created great places to live. But then very rapidly we found populations were moving in, and we had problems with sewage. Melbourne was no different. It used to be called Smelbourne and have issues with sewage disposal. So we invented, as engineers, sewage systems to solve those issues. We then, everyone loved to live there. It became very impervious, and we became focused on solving drainage issues, so introducing drainage systems and flooding issues. And then we noticed that our waterways were getting pretty horrible with that, huge amounts of runoff and wastewater entering our waterways, and led to a focus on waterways as the key driver and water quality. We're now seeing in places like Melbourne the transformation more on a water cycle city, so recognizing that stormwater runoff and wastewater are actually really valuable water resources, and we could be capturing those and reusing those to help with drought and protecting our waterways at the same time, with the ultimate state for integrated water management being working towards that kind of full integration of urban design and water management in an integrated way to support livability and greening. If we go to the next slide, I'll talk about Melbourne's specific triggers, I guess, on its journey. It really started in, I guess, the 80s and 90s, where there was an outcry from our local residents about the state of our waterways. And we went on a journey where we introduced green infrastructure, water-sensitive urban design, or sustainable drainage, as you may call it, to really try and improve water quality in our waterway systems. We also experienced drought, which led to more of a focus on capturing stormwater as a resource and wastewater and using that for reuse. And battling the impacts of urban heat and really supporting livability and really thinking about integrated water management to support our communities. And that's where we are today. We go to the next slide. So the concept of integrated water management is really talked about in this wheel you'll see here, is really about thinking about water supply, wastewater management, and stormwater management all in one, and of course the impacts on waterways, but also if we think about those together, the benefits we could drive for communities, and flood resilience and livability and landscapes, as well as water security. If we go to the next slide. Thanks, Elliot. I just wanted to dwell on, I guess, the most recent part of our journey in Melbourne, and that is our focus has changed really from water quality to water quantity. So all of our research on water, waterways and waterway health has shown us that all of our efforts over the last 10 to 15 years into putting in more things like rain gardens and wetlands has obviously helped the pollutants entering our waterways, but it's not changing the dial to the extent that we'd like. We really need to tackle the core problem of just having less runoff from our cities. So how can we intercept that runoff even before it gets to a waterway and make the best use of it to harvest that and reuse it and effectively mimic the natural water cycle? So once that water would have infiltrated or evaporated, we now want to capture that and reuse it for other beneficial uses. We go to the next slide. The difference between the natural and urban flows to a waterway, I'm sure you're all familiar with, but it used to be, very consistent through base flows that are entering through groundwater flow and a little bit of runoff, but urban patterns really change that. And so if we click on again, Elliot, we'll see that effectively we're setting ourselves stormwater harvesting targets in Melbourne now, which effectively try to harvest that urban peak. So holding that back, not just retarding it, but actually removing it from the system by reusing that to replace potable water users, to use that for irrigation in some cases, to take that back to households for reuse, and really start to mimic this natural runoff pattern to protect the waterways. If we go to the next slide. So Melbourne has now set itself some pretty hefty targets to work towards for stormwater harvesting. And those are largely focused on the edge, so the sprawling edges of the city where most of the growth is happening and where you've got the tributaries to the main waterways that are largely untouched and haven't experienced those urbanized flows before. This is where it's most important to protect that geomorphology and effectively avoid that waterway changing, and by harvesting that stormwater to protect it. And that's where we've got targets of 80% of stormwater to be removed. Whereas the inner parts of the city, we're aiming towards 35%, recognizing that a lot of that damage has already been done. The next slide. So the kind of strategies we're using to employ that include things like wetlands, rain gardens, as well as rainwater tanks and large-scale stormwater harvesting schemes, where we're effectively scooping up stormwater coming out of those treatment wetlands and taking it away to another reuse. That might be to a local water supply reservoir, it might be to agriculture, it might be to open space irrigation. Or if you go to the next one, it could be more distributed through development, looking at localized rainwater harvesting and localized soakage areas, etc., to try and meet those targets within development. The next slide. This effectively creates a circularity within new neighborhoods and the city to try and mimic that natural balance that you see on the left of this slide. So we're trying to mimic what would be the natural runoff and effectively scoop that up and reuse it locally for stormwater harvesting, and where we've found solutions that are allowing us to get towards that goal. So I think next slide, I think that that is it, but a little holiday to Australia and a glimpse into what's going on the other side of the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Celeste. That was excellent. I like the smell bond. I didn't know that before. You still there? Brilliant. Thank you. So from water quantity, back to water quality. We've now got two people from Welsh Water, River Liaison Managers, Ellie Lewis and Dan Humphreys. So their river health journey is focused in Wales, Pontyfellin Lane, nature-based solutions. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah. Cheers. Let's give a round of applause to Ellie and Dan.
Hi there, thank you very much. So my name's Dan Humphreys. I'm just checking to see if you could share the slide there. That's fantastic. So yes, we're based over in Wales on the western coast of the United Kingdom. And Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water is obviously a water company that serves clean drinking water and wastewater services to approximately 3 million customers in Wales. We have around 36,000 kilometres of sewers and over 800 wastewater treatment works. Now, what we are going to talk today is another key asset of ours, which are combined sewer overflows or storm overflows. And we, being in Wales, it's a very wet country, being on the western side, and so we have kind of over 2,000 of these type of overflow systems in our sewer network in Wales. So the story that we'll be covering today, obviously, is looking at improvements and how we can look at using nature-based approaches to deliver improved health of a river. And this particular river is near Pontyfellin Lane, which is in the South Wales Valleys in the Southeast Wales area. Now, we will be explaining further also an approach that we took on in Wales called the Better River Quality Task Force. It was a key strategic kind of approach on how we would work with various partners and organisations on how we could better deliver outcomes for Welsh rivers. And that played a key part in kind of our approaches around this particular scheme. Next slide, please. Brilliant. So as a means of background, Afon Lwyd here is a direct translation to Grey River. So the Welsh language there is the Afon. Afon is river, and Lwyd is grey. It's a 21-kilometre long river in the Southeast Valleys, going from Blaenavon at the top, a previously kind of industrialised area, and obviously now is much more urban. And then kind of it leads out to the River Usk at the bottom before leading out to the English Channel. The Afon Lwyd is currently only achieving a moderate status under the Water Framework Directive. And the reasons for not achieving good status includes barriers to fish, migration, urbanisation, intermittent sewage discharges, and diffuse sewage discharges. Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water have got a storm overflow assessment framework outcome for no harm. So kind of our hope will be by 2040 is to ensure that kind of any impact that these storm overflows have on any river, that we can work our way down to have no actual ecological harm. So improving this storm overflow won't necessarily change the overall WFD status, but it could change the storm overflow to having a no impact on a good status. Next slide, please. So in terms of storm overflows, this is just a short diagram, really, kind of just to give a kind of an indication. A lot of our kind of sewer network kind of in the UK is a combined sewer network. So it takes wastewater from properties and businesses, but it also will take kind of roof water, highways drainage, and so on. Therefore, kind of when you do have certain downpours of rain or kind of extreme prolonged rainfall events and storms during the winter months, obviously the volume of water in these sewers kind of multiplies. So the storm overflow, they do play a key vital role, and kind of this is the difficult part from a environmental perspective. They're obviously not pretty to look at. However, the key role there and the reason they were all put in the first place was to protect properties from being flooded during times of heavy rainfall events. So to remove these from our system, just in Wales alone, we predicted that it would cost between 9 to 14 billion pounds, and involving digging up almost every street in the country. So obviously, kind of when we had to look at it, you know, kind of the customers are the bill payers, and obviously we have to look after kind of how we can do this properly and kind of the most cost-effective way, and kind of how we can be approached as in terms of looking at identifying and prioritizing those assets that are having the most environmental harm first, and then working our way through, especially when you've got over 2,000 of these type of assets. In terms of the Pontevelin Lane, which is where the location where we're going to be looking at today, we had to look at that part, and kind of when we did our assessments kind of through the framework, that fed back to us that this particular storm overflow was having a severe impact in terms of its operation, and that was due not only to numbers of hours that this asset was spilling during the course of the year, but it was also kind of an aesthetic version of events, you know, kind of the impact it was having from a visual, in terms of items that were escaping from the sewer into the river, but also kind of the actual biological impact, the invertebrate impact that it was having on that river as well. Right, next slide there is just showing the actual location here. So the storm overflow was located in a field, kind of it's an urbanized area in between an industrial estate and kind of a localized residency, basically. So kind of we have fields there, kind of as you can see on the map there, kind of that were rented out to a tenant farmer. And so you would have kind of livestock like sheep and cattle in using the field kind of during the course of the year. So obviously you'd have to approach this during the summer months. Access would be not a problem for our operators. However, during winter months, it would be virtually impossible for our crews to access the field because you couldn't drive on it. So it'd be a case of sending two crews and hooking up kind of hoses together, you know, to kind of carry out maintenance work on the asset. Next slide there, please. Great. So when we started looking, kind of we knew this was one of our assets that was having the biggest impact in terms of its environmental impact. We started looking then at the benefit assessment aspect of it. In terms of the usual way that kind of, I guess, a lot of what companies have approached things before is going for the grey solution. Now, when we assessed the potential here, kind of what we needed to do to kind of result in a positive no impact scenario, it would be a case of a 56 million pound kind of grey solution of a storage tank that was to the size of 22,000 meters cubed. On the greener side of things, if we went with a nature-based solution, it would look at kind of a 13 million pound kind of integrated wetland system. And so kind of this is where we started to take the approach, where we started to engage with our stakeholders, our key environmental regulators, and we started looking at this approach, especially as the land was available there, that field. It would be a case of purchasing the land and kind of trying to see kind of if we could deliver a nature-based solution here. Next slide, please. We'll just show you a quick video here of the actual location. This is obviously the design of when the wetland will be in place. This has just recently been completed earlier on this year in 2025. And it has a variation between aerated reed beds to the more standardized constructed wetland to the back end, which Ellie will discuss later on. Thank you. And then this next slide here, as you can see, there's quite a few key different instructions, I guess, here kind of just to focus in on, but effectively kind of in terms of the storm overflow itself, the CSO, what we have kind of put in place is kind of improved the actual screening at the asset. Kind of obviously there's an upgrade that's taken place there kind of in terms of the solution and the decision. And then it's a first of its kind in Wales, really, kind of. So what we would normally see kind of with a wastewater treatment works, you'd be able to see kind of final effluents kind of being discharged to a reed bed and so on, and then go out to the river potentially. In terms of this is a storm overflow, so it has intermittent discharges. So when it does operate, it will go down through the aerated reed bed, and kind of that, the idea behind that is kind of that will take out most of the nutrients and so on, and then it will go on to the constructed cells, kind of following cells number 1 and number 2 at the bottom left hand side there. Then we'll reuse kind of the existing kind of pipe work that leads out to the river.
Dan, really sorry to interrupt you, but conscious of time, and we've got other people we talk through. Are you able to hand over to Ellie quite quickly?
No problem. And we can hand on to Ellie next. Yeah, that's for her slides. Thank you very much.
Ellie, you haven't got long, but yeah, if you could smash through these slides, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course, no problem. So in terms of timeline, it has taken a long time to push these decisions through. So we started this process in May 2019. We needed to engage our environmental regulator in Wales, Natural Resources Wales. We needed to come to a permitting solution with them. We had a permit for the storm overflow, but we needed to then transform that into a permit for this novel treatment system for that storm overflow. So this is a brief summary of the timeline. So as you can see, it's taken about 6 years to get to where we are now, where the construction is complete and the wetland is operational. It is achieving brilliant results in terms of treatment of total suspended solids, ammonia, phosphorus, and BOD. So if you go to the next slide, please, Elliot. So if I just go through some of the nature-based solution benefits, I'm sure you're all aware. Oh, hang on, I think this is the wrong slide, sorry. Perfect, thank you. So I'm sure you're all aware of these anyway, but obviously with the nature-based solution, you get all of those additional benefits that Dan has touched on in terms of the amenity value, biodiversity value, improving the landscaping and creating an area that the local population can enjoy. So I'll just skip over this one. So if you go to the next slide, please. Perfect. So in Wales, we've got the Better River Quality Task Force, and this task force came about with the purpose of reducing the adverse impact of any overflow discharges on the environment by targeting investment and taking regulatory action to deliver improvements. So it works as a collaborative group to develop the existing regulatory framework to ensure water and wastewater companies effectively manage and operate their networks. Regulators can use their existing powers to then drive the right outcomes and hold companies to account. So if we just go into the final slide, the task force includes representatives from Natural Resources Wales, our regulator, the Welsh Government, Ofwat, our financial regulator, ourselves, and Hafren Dyfrdwy, the other water company within Wales. And it's also got Afonydd Cymru, which is the umbrella organisation for all the rivers trusts in Wales, and the Consumer Council for Water. So it's a great platform in which to discuss novel approaches such as Pontevelin and allow challenge basically from all of our other stakeholders and also from a customer perspective So consulting the task force throughout this was key to ensure stakeholder support from the project, and it's allowed us to get to where we are, where the wetland and the reed bed is functional and operational. So just so you know, within the picture there, you can see that rectangular bed at the top, that's the aerated reed bed, and then there's the two constructed wetlands next to it and a public amenity area as well. So it's a great combined sort of integrated system that's doing a fantastic job, and I will leave it on that note.
Amazing. Thank you. So yeah, really interesting to see there, to hear about Pontevellin Lane, and it's fantastic to actually see a real life example that's now being constructed using MBS successfully to improve river health. And also a great mention there around initiatives centered around stakeholder collaboration. I think that's another common theme we wanted to get out of all of these case studies. So really, really interesting. Now we're going to introduce you to people in the room. First of which is Matthew McCartney, a principal researcher from IMI, who will share insights of the importance of environmental flows in river health using the Limpopo River in Southern Africa. Thank you, Matthew. Here you go.
Great, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. As Elliot said, I'm going to be talking about environmental flows as a tool, just one tool that can be used for trying to improve or to look at river health. So in simple terms, sort of environmental flows are about thinking about the amount of water that needs to stay in a river, a lake, or a wetland to keep it healthy. And obviously we recognise, as Rob pointed out very eloquently at the beginning, that we need to think about modifying rivers in order to, for socio-economic development. So we need to modify rivers through dams, irrigation systems, water supply abstractions, etc., in order to provide for people. But at the same time, we want to maintain those systems, rivers in healthy conditions in order to for it to be sustainable into the future. So we need to balance the human needs and the ecosystem needs. And environmental flows are really about trying to find, as Rob pointed out, that right balance. I mean, we also recognise, of course, that human needs, and as he also said, what we want from our rivers changes over time. So that it's not a one-off thing, you have to keep doing this, but the idea is that we try and find that balance for the current time, and also thinking about climate change, also maybe into the future. So E-flows or environmental flows or E-flows are about defining flow regimes that maintain critical elements of natural flow regimes. They support aquatic biodiversity, they sustain wetland and floodplain ecosystems, they preserve water quality, because again, water quality, a lot of that's dependent on the flow regime. But importantly, they also support human livelihoods and human needs through the provision of ecosystem services, etc. And it's not just about maintaining a minimum flow in a river. Often in the past, that's what people thought, you just needed to maintain this minimum flow. We now recognise that ecosystems and biodiversity need a flow regime, a range of different flows. And so environmental flow estimation is about identifying the low flows and the base flows, also thinking about the high flows and the flood flows that are needed to maintain, trigger fish migration, maintain floodplain habitats, etc. And so that the approaches that are adopted now tend to identify this flow regime. And as Celeste pointed out, it's a sort of a mimicking of the natural flow regime, but recognising that we're not going to keep all of the elements of that flow regime, and that some water has to be taken away or diverted for human needs. So ideally, E-flows is... Oh, sorry, I've gone a bit too far. Ideally, E-flows is about combining science, local knowledge, and policy, if you like, to figure out how much water a river needs to stay healthy while still meeting these human needs. And there's different approaches. I'm not going to go into these in detail, but there are different approaches for estimating E-flows. The simplest are basing on the historic record of the hydrology of the river, so not thinking at all about the ecology, but saying that that the hydrology is what drives the ecology, and if you can get the hydrology right, then the ecology will follow. Hydraulic methods are a bit more complicated. You think about some of the hydraulic indicators, the depth, the width, the velocity of the flow, and think about how that links to aquatic life. So you might want to fix a certain depth for fish passage, or a wetted perimeter or something for insect habitat. Next is habitat simulation models, where you identify particular key indicator species and you explicitly link the flow to the habitat suitability for that species. And then you model that habitat and show how that habitat is available for different flow regimes. And then finally, these holistic methods where you try and look at the whole of the ecosystem, the fish, the plants, everything, including the water culture, so the water quality, and importantly these days also sometimes including things like cultural values and religious values that communities also put on a river. But you try and bring all of that together, and working with scientists and local communities, you build up a holistic approach. And these approaches, it gets more complicated as you move down the page, and it takes a lot more time. These holistic methods are far more complicated. You can spend years defining the environmental flow needs using these holistic methods, as compared to relatively quick, simple, but much more approximate methods such as the hydrology method. So now going on to the Limpopo case study, very different to what we just heard about Wales. The Limpopo has a catchment area of about 415,000 kilometres squared, has 4 riparian countries: Botswana, Zimbabwe, South Africa and Mozambique. Those countries are at different stages of socio-economic development, very different countries, so different elements are important in different places. And of course, you have Mozambique at the bottom end of the system, whereas Botswana, Zimbabwe further upstream. So again, different demands. It's a semi-arid climate with highly variable rainfall, frequent floods and droughts. Approximately 18 million people live in the basin. It's heavily utilised for irrigation, domestic supply, particularly in South Africa. There's a lot of mining and industry within that country. And there's several dams that regulate flow on the river as well. So why are e-flows important? They're important because, the river is highly variable. It's stressed in places. Managing water carefully is essential for both the people and the ecosystem. Different parts of the river are stressed differently. I should also point out at the bottom end of the South Africa-Mozambique border, you have the Kruger National Park. This river flows through the Kruger National Park. Highly, obviously, very, very valuable in terms of biodiversity, but also for tourist income for South Africa. Many of the major tributaries are very stressed. So, yeah, I'm not going to go into details, but a lot of those systems are stressed, and you need to think about the flows on the tributaries as well as the mainstream. The approach that we used to estimate environmental flows here was something called prob flow. It's a hydrology-based method. So it's looking at the hydrology, not so much at the ecology, but it's a slightly more complicated method than some of the others. It's based on probabilities of flow, likelihoods of different flows occurring throughout the year, and it defines sort of ecological thresholds as minimum flows, etc., to sustain key ecosystems or species. And a unique feature of it is that it can be used to estimate flows across a basin, not just at specific locations. So in the interest of trying being quite quickly, so in this study we worked a lot with LIMCOM, which is the River Basin Organisation. We looked at what their strategic objectives were for the basin. We looked also at the policy, so the SADC is part of the Southern Africa Development Community, what protocols were in place for them and what regional strategic plans were there in order to come up with them to defining environmental flow needs at different locations. And another unique feature was we actually included groundwater in this because it's an arid and semi-arid catchment. groundwater is obviously very important for maintaining base flows, and that was explicitly brought into the modelling. This just shows you, some of the results, working with the stakeholders to rank the importance of different, I'm going to say the word ecosystem services, that people wanted in different parts of the catchment and the basin. And then this is a very short, it's just showing numbers, again, boring numbers, but numbers which I showed how much needed to be left in the river at certain locations. These, of course, are just averages. There's much more that goes behind this and the actual flow regimes that were there. So it's, much more on detail on the timing of the flows and then the linking of those flows to specific ecosystem services and what they could deliver. And with that, I'll just say thank you very much, and that's why environmental flows are important as a tool for river health. Thank you.
Well done. Fab, thanks Matthew. And Matthew will be staying around afterwards during the workshop if you've got any questions to follow up. Fab, okay, so on to our next in-person speaker. We've got Hazel King, and this ties in quite nicely. We've spoken about the quantity, the quality, the environmental flows, but what's the point if we don't have that connectivity and that wider catchment link? So Hazel's from the head of barrier mitigation in Fisheries Ireland, so look forward to hearing your talk. Hazel.
Thanks, Anna. As Anna mentioned, I'm the head of the Barrier Mitigation Division in Inland Fisheries Ireland, and IFI is the state agency or government agency in Ireland that protects, manages and conserves fish and their habitats across Ireland. We have responsibility for over 74,000 kilometres of watercourses and 128,000 hectares of lakes. So I'm here today to speak about a national programme that we have recently commenced in Ireland in relation to mitigating the effects of artificial barriers on rivers and streams. So Inland Fisheries Ireland have been tasked with the National Barrier Mitigation Programme in the National Water Action Plan 2024, which is our river basin management plan for Ireland. So what do I mean when I speak about barriers? I'm talking about man-made structures that are placed within our rivers, which prevent the natural upstream and downstream migration of fish species. However, in terms of hydromorphology, these barriers can also have a significant effect and cause huge issues with the natural river processes, such as erosion and deposition cycles, and also that temperature distribution across our watercourses. The photos provided on the left just give a brief picture of the types of barriers we are facing on our rivers and streams, and these range from bridge aprons to incorrectly constructed culverts to weirs and man-made crossing points. So when we look at a structure, we want to assess whether it poses a barrier or not to fish migration, and these assessments are focused around kind of three main factors. The first being the physical size, so looking at what height or a jump that a fish may have to make to travel upstream and what length must it cross to do that. We also, in combination, consider the depth of water that's available across the face of the structure. As you'll see in some of the photos, there's not a lot there. And lastly, we investigate the velocity of the flow. So how fast is that water flowing across the area for passage? So each of those factors affect different fish species differently. So to give you some context, Inland Fisheries Ireland has been compiling and documenting a national inventory of barriers across Ireland since 2019. This is an extract from the publicly available dashboard, and it's presented here. It documents the location of the barriers that have already undergone assessment. The team developed a rapid, bespoke online tool to capture photos and data in relation to those barriers on our rivers and streams. So of the potential 73,000 barriers that were identified from a desk-based study, 5,000 structures have been already confirmed as barriers, with an additional 1,600 also confirmed but need to further site visits. So quite extensive. So as I mentioned earlier, dams and barriers, they can have a significant impact on how rivers naturally function. So this infographic highlights some of the main effects. One major concern is the impacts on habitats and water quality. And when water backs up behind a structure, the levels rise and velocity drops. So that often, can cause water temperature rises, and that warmer water can stress or even eliminate some species that depend on those cooler conditions. So the healthy riverbed substrate, those clean, loose gravels that are vital for spawning, they can become buried in sediment. Barriers also block the free passage of fish and other aquatic life, and I suppose this, and as everybody mentioned earlier, it's not just about fish migration, it's about the entire life cycle of those fish. So if the species cannot move to feed, to breed, or to find refuge, they simply just disappear. And then what happens? It's not just the habitats that suffered, and this is the key point. Water quality isn't only about the chemistry. Yes, we measure pollutants and nutrients, but we also assess the biotic life, those living organisms in the water. So if the fish and the invertebrates and other key species are gone, water quality is considered reduced, even if the chemistry looks fine. So when these biological and physical processes are disrupted, the natural cycles of erosion and deposition that sustain rivers are broken. Over time, biodiversity declines, ecosystems lose resilience, and the very character of the river changes, and we need to change that. So here is an example of where redundant weir was mitigated around 2013 in Inland Fisheries Ireland. And this is where we have a partial breach placed in the structure, allowing the river levels to re-establish to their natural levels, and the width of the breach is approximately equivalent to the upstream channel width. So the national programme for which I have responsibility for is called the National Barrier Mitigation Programme, and we are tasked with mitigation of approximately 257 barriers in Ireland by 2027. So we've assembled a dedicated team of 28 specialists, including engineers, project managers, property experts, environmental scientists, and all the supporting staff to tackle the issues of barriers. We have governmental support with a commitment of €110 million over the next 2.5 years, targeting specifically barrier removal and mitigation. So the programme is multifaceted. Within IFI, we undertake the work in-house, but we also fund projects for other state agencies and local authorities, and that's creating real mutual benefits. These agencies are often owners of redundant and old structures, and they have no access to funds to mitigate or to remove those redundant assets. So our dedicated team is focused solely on barriers and on informing and liaising with our stakeholders. That laser focus grows experience within our own team, but also experience across our organisation. That builds resistance, and that in turn delivers results. So what are these results? We're aiming for multiple benefits, looking at better hydromorphological conditions, improving that sediment delivery downstream. We're also looking at restored riverbeds, and that strengthen the physical habitats and the habitats conditioned, and ensuring those strong connections between those habitats. All of this, it aligns with the European Biodiversity Strategy and with the Article 9 of the Nature Restoration Regulation, which calls on all EU member states to restore 25,000 kilometres of free-flowing rivers by 2030. This in tandem has simultaneously the ability to meet the requirements also of the Water Framework Directive in terms of water quality improvements. So with just over 100 barrier mitigations already identified, we're not just talking about progress, we're making it happen. Each project is a step forward in restoring those river ecosystems, breaking down those obstacles and reconnecting those habitats that are so important. We're driving real change today and building a healthier, more resilient future for our waterways. Our journey is well underway, and with that, I will conclude. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Hazel. Sounds like quite an ambitious program, I want to say, 2027. But great that Ireland are focusing directly on biodiversity improvements, which is arguably one of the most important corners of river health. So last, but certainly not least, I have the honor to introduce to the stage Nicole Silk. She is the Global Director for Freshwater Outcomes at the Nature Conservancy, who will be sharing a journey of arguably one of the most important river basins in the world, the Amazon. So please join me in welcoming her to the stage. Nicole.
The clicker.
Yeah.
I have control of the clicker. How y'all doing? Anybody need to stand up? Sit down, stand up, wake up? My job is to support the Nature Conservancy's entire portfolio of freshwater projects around the world. I see a lot of similarity in work we do in different places. And there are some aspects, some of our projects that really intrigue me. And the Amazon is one of those places because of the size and the scale and the scope and the complexity. So I'm really excited to put my Amazon hat on. But for context, the Nature Conservancy's freshwater work touches down in 43 countries. So in every region of the world, we have work going on. A little bit over 400 projects, depending on how you measure what is a project. Some of them are very small, and some of them are very big. So with respect to the Amazon, all right. I just have a few introductory slides to ground us in the challenges that are in play around the world, and I think they actually connect really nicely to some of the comments that we've just heard. So just to remind us all, the pace of freshwater biodiversity decline is faster than what we see on land or in the oceans considerably. We actually understand the reasons why that have to do a lot with the decline or alteration of key ecological attributes. You frame it a little bit differently, but it's very much along the same lines related to water quality, water quantity, biotic composition, habitat, and connectivity. Connectivity, in terms of the key ecological attributes, I often think about as one of the biggest or most important variables amongst these KEAs because connectivity allows for species to utilize different habitats that they need for their life cycles, right? From river channels into floodplains, into wetlands, moving up and down rivers longitudinally and latitudinally. So that ends up being really important. And when we look around the world, not only do we see a significant decline of freshwater population loss, but we also see a significant decline in connectivity around the world because we ask a lot of our rivers and our freshwater ecosystems. We need them for pretty much everything that we require: energy and food, water to drink, transportation, etc. So back to the Amazon. So again, as I mentioned, I find the Amazon just fascinating. This is the biggest basin in the world. Not only is it 6.9 million square kilometers in total surface, but it supports an incredible amount of freshwater biodiversity, so over almost 3,000 species of fish. But I would also say, importantly, many of those fish are using different parts and pieces of the system, and some of them use the entire basin. So species like the Dorado catfish are migrating and using all parts and pieces of the system. The Amazon also contributes to the sort of atmospheric processes of planet Earth. There are many, many, many challenges, right? Many threats to the system. Those range from deforestation, which is often what we think about when we think about the Amazon. But let's get real. There are also many other challenges, including mining, which contributes to water quality declines, agriculture, which also contributes to both removal of water, abstraction of water, as well as contamination back into the river itself, and of course dams that can carve and cut up systems, and finally climate change. So the Amazon, I think those of you who haven't been there, you probably think about this as a very wet system, a place that's prone to floods and flooding. It's also been a place where there's been quite a bit of fire and, in recent years, drought. So again, climate change is making our freshwater systems more dynamic, right? More flashy, more inclined to drought, more inclined to periods of extreme as well. Over the decades, so the Nature Conservancy has been working in the Amazon basin for about 30 years, maybe a little bit more. Our approach has typically been kind of country by country, really looking at what we can do in individual places. As we look forward, we're now taking a step back and asking ourselves some harder questions about, well, what's possible if we take a basin-wide approach? And of course, there's complexities there too, but when you start looking at the system as a whole, you realize there's more we can do in terms of strengthening indigenous peoples and local communities' rights and management of their territories, of thinking about fisheries and inland fisheries management, particularly across borders and boundaries, in terms of nature-based solutions for resilient watersheds, and innovative finance and national commitments. I also would say that it's only when we take a step back and understand how the system functions can we consider also, well, what else do we need to do beyond supporting local fisheries, beyond trying to avoid new dam development so that we don't have to think about removing those barriers down the road. But the question about what's in store for durable freshwater protection. Can we put in place policies or protected areas that result in greater long-term commitments in place for these places as well? So the key to this success at the end of the day, and it's a good reminder for all of us, of course, is people, including people who live and work and rely on the system at a local level. They're central to success, and I think when we're imagining scale, of course, it pushes us to also think about how do you transition trust from a local level to national levels, and then transboundary and basin scale. That's not an easy task, but I think this is the challenge ahead of us for systems like the Amazon. And there are some successes that I want to just sort of remind us about, even now in this basin, places where we have agreements with local communities on how they fish and where they fish, that are models for other countries to replicate. Sometimes those are transferred by NGOs. In other cases, they're transferred by government agencies. There are also places where there have been some very, very interesting innovations in community-led freshwater protections, like the fluvial reserves in Ecuador, again, that are kind of innovative models that frankly didn't exist before, but now are being looked at by the other countries in this basin. And then innovative finance, too, is part of this puzzle, including opportunities like looking at sovereign debt and asking some more challenging questions of how you can get government commitments. So in closing, I just want to remind us all to take a step back, to think about our systems as being part of larger systems, both ecological systems, economic systems, but also social systems. You know, there's a lot more we can do, but again, it's really amazing to recognize that if you just let rivers be rivers, if you return them to what they looked like before, they recover very quickly. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That was really inspiring. So I think that was a great sort of run through for 5 journeys from around the world. And now what we want you guys to think about is your own personal river health journeys that you can maybe bring to the table. So I can see that you guys are all sort of dotted around, but I do have one ask, and to try and maybe wake you guys up a little bit after all those listening. If you can try and focus onto 6 tables. So we've got all our panelists here. We've got Rob on that table. We've got Matthew here, Nicole here, and Hazel here. If you guys can first filter and fill those tables, and then Anna or I will take those 2 tables at the back, that'd be amazing. And maybe it will, like I said, wake you guys up a little bit as well. Because now you guys are going to get involved. We want to get this engagement going. So if you guys can all make a move. And in the meantime, what Anna's going to be doing is handing out some of these diagrams that we've produced. And what we want you to do is think about a personal river in your life, whether that was a river that you knew about when you were a child, or one that maybe you, through the work that you've done here in your career, you've had a direct impact on. And what I want you guys to think about is we've given you guys a couple blank diagrams, or what we're calling a river health journey. But see the diagram as a timeline. Yes, it's a river, but we've tried to con the whole image of using a river as a timeline. And what we want you guys to do is add essentially all the different things that you know about from a natural state that maybe you knew about from the beginning of your journey of the river. What are the human impacts that you've had, or not you've had, but the human impacts on the river itself? So that's in that middle section of a diagram. I appreciate you guys don't have the diagrams, so you know what I'm talking about. But if you give us a second. And then what I want you guys to do is think about drawing a line in terms of where you think you are along the journey. So if I just go into the next slide very quickly. Oh, I should have just showed it up on here. That would have been smart. Right, you guys can see what I mean. So see it as a timeline. Don't see it as a river. But yeah, the key thing is like, where do you think, if you had to, where do you think that your river that you're thinking about, where along that journey are you guys currently? And if you're a little bit overwhelmed or you're not sure, you don't have a personal river, that's absolutely fine. If you want to think about some of the journeys that we've just presented as well today. So if you want to take, for example, Hazel's example, Nicole's example, feel free to do that as well if you're a bit stuck. And finally, what I'll say, we've also got some prompt questions at the bottom as well. That will also help you guys if you get a bit stuck. But also facilitators on each of your guys' table will hopefully facilitate a lot of discussion. So what we've done further to finally help is done an example for you. So I think Anna is showing that around as well. That will help you guys maybe just get a little bit thinking ahead as well. So this is a very filled in, very nice pictures and drawings on here. You guys don't have to do that. You can use words, obviously. But it'll be really good at the end of the workup. So we've got about, I think, 15 minutes now just to go through this. So online, you guys will be in the good hands of Celeste and Martin. Us in the room here, we're going to be disconnected. But we'll meet back in about 15 minutes time and discuss what we've shown. So yeah, looking forward to it, guys. Please also do introductions on your table. So yeah, we'll come around. Thank you. That's for people online. We got some more. Okay. I'm still on the mic.
couple more minutes and then we'll come back together and wrap up.
We can ask online. Can we bring the online people back in? Keep everyone in the room. Keep talking. I was just gonna. Can people online hear me? Perfect. Welcome back online. I want to call to either Celeste or Martin. If you guys were helping facilitate those discussions, is there anything that you're seeing on the Miro board that we've got up there? Celeste or Martin, please go ahead.
Yeah, we've got a few people kind of exploring their own river journeys and challenges, and highlighting, I guess, the importance of bringing community along the way, along the journey with you, looking forward, and obviously making those ecological restorations and some interesting differences, I guess, in the desired state or the ultimate state that we want to get to in that transformation.
Celeste, do you know what I might do actually? Very quickly, thanks for that. But what I'm going to do, if everyone in the room now, sorry to really disrupt your conversations, Celeste is giving a very quick summary just of what's happening online, and then we'll get Rob up here. But it's really good that you guys are doing this, and Celeste's just going to summarize really quickly what she's heard online. So sorry, go again, Celeste.
No worries. I think, yeah, we've had a few people just exploring their own journeys for rivers around the world online, and just the importance of bringing communities along the way in setting that ultimate vision, and making it important to resonate with both communities and ecological richness, and really just recognizing that that ultimate state of a local river is really going to be a different state depending on where you are. Yeah, some really interesting journeys to explore there. That's great,
Celeste. I think what I'll do then, just to try and bring the session to a close, because I realize we're going to get kicked out of this room as well, we want to invite back to the stage Rob, who I can see is in the middle of a conversation. But we've got 2 minutes left that we want to make the best use of. Really sorry to break up your discussion, but Rob, we would love for you to close the session.
Well, listen, please keep the conversations going amongst you. We've had on my table 6 incredibly different rivers, and that's so exciting to start that discussion. I'm going to suggest we just take some photographs of some of these so that we capture these. But really great, we've had 3 examples of lines in very different places on that map. So we've got a river which is actually pretty natural still, but facing some real challenges. How do we avoid that river getting impacted by the challenges of the future, by the climate challenges and other challenges that might come? So that's a warning to us. We might be in a natural state. How do we face those challenges? If we're in the middle, we're in, maximum human impact territory. So that's where we've really got to pull all those levers, because it's about water quantity. We've got the history of legislation, the history of land ownership, all playing into that river. And there's a lot of undoing to do. And then we've also got examples where we're moving to the right. We're moving into the rehabilitation stage. And that's bringing challenges about how we work together in new partnerships, in new ways, across boundaries, across silos, so that we can actually achieve some of these transformatory changes that are actually going to drive us back to river health. So it doesn't matter where you are on the journey, thinking about that journey and thinking with other people is going to help you to move along the path in the direction which is most valuable for your river. So thank you for bringing your energy this afternoon. Thank you for listening. Thank you to all the presenters for showing us just that diversity of effort that goes into creating healthy rivers for the future. Well done, everyone.
And I think we'll close there. Thank you so much for your time. Anna?
So then you can, so take them home, and then. But let me just get a quick, and we'll try and summarise the session. And
thank you for those online. I guess we'll say bye to those. Thank you.
Yours.